Welcome to the Aesthetic Doctor Podcast. We don't shy away and keep secrets here. We empower you with education, telling you the truth about all things aesthetic medicine while encouraging you to be the best version of yourself. It's time to look great and feel good doing it. This is your host, mom, speaker, and board-certified physician, Dr. Judith Borger.
Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 81 of the Aesthetic Doctor Podcast. This is Dr. Borger, and today I'm so excited to really get to the roots of this podcast, back to the roots where I talk about an aesthetic procedure that I've literally come to love, and that's all the rage right now, and that is biostimulation with Sculptra. And what I always say to people is, number one, I would love to just have my whole face be made out of Sculptra and be bathed in Sculptra. But number two, that it's really has a lot of science to it, yet it is sheer magic, in my opinion. Let's start about what is Sculptra, right? So Sculptra is an injectable treatment made from something called poly-L-lactic acid, or abbreviated PLLA. So what this is a synthetic substance that actually has been used for decades. It's the same substance that's in dissolvable sutures, so it has a long safety profile. Now, in 2004, which it's crazy, it's over 20 years ago, the FDA approved Sculptra for treating something called facial lipoatrophy, which is the loss of fat tissue that's often seen in people with things like HIV, certain cancer treatments, certain other kind of wasting diseases, where really the temples cave in, the cheeks cave in, and you get a little bit of that more, it's not sound to be bad, but more like skeleton look to your face. And by 2009, which is 5 years later, Sculptra gained approval for broader aesthetic uses, including treating general volume loss. So we know traditional fillers such as dermal fillers. I have an episode on those. They add instant volume by physically filling the space between the skin, and kind of giving you that gel-like substance that gives added volume. Sculptra is different. It is called a biostimulator, and I think you have heard me talk about biostimulators. So Sculptra works more gradually. It's a biostimulatory injectable, meaning it stimulates your natural collagen production over time. The result is that you kind of get a more subtle, natural restoration of volume and improved skin texture that can last up to 2 years or more with proper maintenance. So it's a biostimulatory, which means it stimulates your own natural collagen production. So that kind of gets me to my next point, which is where we're going to get a little bit more technical, and we're going to discuss how Sculptra works on a biological level, or for all of you science people out there, its mechanism of action. Basically, when Sculptra is injected, its primary ingredient, the poly-L-lactic acid, or PLLA, acts as a stimulant for fibroblasts. I have talked about fibroblasts a lot, but for those of you who don't remember what they are, fibroblasts are the cells in your skin that are responsible for producing collagen, which gives your skin its structure and elasticity. So what kind of happens after you get the Sculptra? Initially, you might notice some swelling after the injection, which is due to the water, sterile water used to dilute the product, because Sculptra comes as a powder. So per the guidelines, we dilute it with a certain amount of sterile water to make kind of a liquid. Now, this is similar to how we would suspend Botox, how we suspend a lot of other medicines, because we got to inject it somehow. Now, once the swelling subsides, it's normal for the area to look kind of like as if nothing was done. But don't worry, this is where the magic comes in, because the real magic happens underneath the skin. Over the next several weeks, the PLLA particles trigger a controlled inflammatory response. This stimulates fibroblasts to lay down new collagen in the treated areas. And this is really what makes Sculptra unique. It's not just about adding volume. It's about improving the foundational framework of your skin, making it thicker, making more elastic, and making it more resilient. And this is what I love about Sculptra or any other biostimulators. Because biostimulators work with your body's natural processes, the results look incredibly natural. So let's talk about uses of Sculptra. Now, we know that Sculptra has a wide range of applications, and there's some that are FDA approved, and then there's some that we use a lot that are called off-label, meaning we use them, but they don't have an official FDA approval for that particular indication. Now, before you guys go all up in arms, most of the Botox we use is off-label, right? There is Botox approvals for frowns, for glabella, but we don't have Botox approval for treating bunny lines and all the other things we treat. So it's the same. A lot of times people have used things off label over and over again. Lots of case studies, lots of success, not dangerous, not uncommon. It's just the process to get FDA approval for certain indication is so long that off-label use in aesthetics is incredibly common, and that's why you should really go to a seasoned injector, trust somebody who knows the science, so that what they do, whether it's of course on label, which is great, but or off label, is actually makes sense and is scientifically backed. So let's go back to the FDA approved uses. Sculptra is approved for treating facial volume loss, particular in areas like the temples, cheeks, and nasolabial folds. It is also a great option for addressing hollowed areas caused by aging or other conditions, such as that HIV-associated lipoatrophy that we talked about in the initial approval. So when I tell people about what to use Sculptra for, it's really, in my opinion, in the lower face that it shines. We know that in the mid face, we can use a lot of traditional fillers, but then when we really go from the cheekbones down, when there's a lot of volume loss there and aging and loss of collagen, like that is, in my opinion, the area where biostimulators are like the non plus ultra. That and the temples, because those are really areas when you get sunken in that lower face, when you get sunken in the temples, that really ages people, and kind of you get a loss of perceived like vibrancy and youth. And so biostimulators in that area are amazing. And like I have said, and you will probably hear me say this over the course of the podcast like a million times, I freaking love Sculptra. I love the biostimulators. I think we're going to use them more and more and more. And I really want my whole face to be made out of Sculptra. So let's talk about off-label uses. And one of the most exciting areas where we use Sculptra off-label for is in body contouring. So Sculptra is commonly used for non-surgical buttock augmentation, which is often referred to as the Sculptra butt lift. We definitely do that in our office. It's amazing because not only does it improve the volume, it improves the texture. And BBLs have their own risks and also costs. So for non-surgical augmentation, Sculptra works beautiful. It is also used to rejuvenate any areas where you have a loss of skin quality and elasticity, like the décolletage, meaning kind of that chest, crepey skin, the arms, the knees, and some people even use it in the hands. And another trend that's really growing is to use Sculptra for its improvement of just texture and thickness of crepey skin. So in areas especially prone to sun damage or prone to volume loss. So what makes Sculptra so versatile in the on and off label areas is that it can work on both volume loss and skin quality, which is why I kind of love it in that lower face rejuvenation. It's for patients who want gradual, subtle improvement without the obvious signs of like having work done, aka I don't want to look overfilled, I want to look natural. Like Sculptra is an ideal choice. And don't get me wrong, just because people want to look natural, there is going to be a significant improvement. So sometimes I think people like say, oh, I don't care about this. When people say, oh, looking natural, it means like it's not going to really work. Oh no, Sculptra works, but because it stimulates your own body, it kind of turns back your own clock, and it just gives you that beautiful, subtle, but noticeable like rejuvenation and improvement. So when we really talk about who is an ideal Sculptra candidate? So, like I just said, an ideal candidate is patients seeking gradual, natural looking improvement because, it is a series of treatments over time. So, the advantage of some of the hyaluronic acid or calcium hydroxyapatite fillers is that we inject it, it stays, it's there. People can notice like an immediate before and after. Why with Sculptra, yes, you kind of see a glimpse of what it's going to look like the day of injection, but then it goes away and almost builds itself back up over time. So it does require a little bit of patience. Then the ideal patient is a non-smoker, but then you should all be non-smokers. People should always have realistic expectations of what Sculptra can do, right? It's amazing. And the other thing is I love it in combination treatment with something like a radiofrequency microneedling so that you get skin tightening from that radiofrequency microneedling. You get even more fibroblast stimulation and then some volume restoration from the Sculptra. So for like lower face, jaw lines and things, I love that combo. And then, of course, it's for those patients to want to address like mild to moderate volume loss or improve their skin texture. And the ideal person is somebody with really lower face signs of aging or maybe some temporal hollowing. But then it's kind of interesting because it's such a great biostimulator. If you are a person and you have a skin, I don't think that there is really such a thing as bad candidates for Sculptra. But when we see the patient whose concerns Sculptra perfectly addresses, it's really those patients with the hollowing, with the signs of aging. And that's where I want to really get into like the use in weight loss patients. There's obviously been an incredible rise of medical GLP-1 weight loss. So the Ozempics, the Wegovys and things like that. And there's this thing called Ozempic face. Because of the rapid weight loss, people lose the fat in their face as well. So sometimes, I don't know if you've seen patients like that, where suddenly their faces do look hollow. And so I think in the future, and we already now, it is great for those patients with that GLP-1 associated facial volume loss. And we'll go more into a study about that later. So, what are contraindications? So anybody who's got a history of keloids or hypertrophic scarring, we don't love to use Sculptra on. Anybody who really has an autoimmune condition that's uncontrolled or an active skin infection, because that also we don't want to inject through infections. And then, of course, anybody with a known hypersensitivity to PLLA. Now, what are the common side effects? So common side effects are some swelling, redness, tenderness, or bruising at the injection sites on the day or days following injections. Again, we're sticking a needle into your skin. Then, Sculptra has actually recently gone like a reapproval, and the solution ratio was changed slightly. It used to be that there was a formation of nodules or granulomas associated with Sculptra in the old approval, but honestly, I think since a couple years ago they changed their injection protocol, I have not heard of any nodules or granulomas forming, and I've personally never caused them. So theoretically, that's a complication. And then, of course, there's always like having risks that are associated with inexperienced injectors that really don't know how to inject, where to inject, how to do the proper post-op care, and how to combine it. When you think about it as a patient, whenever you get something like a sculpture done, we always want you to avoid something like NSAIDs or other supplements or medications that increase bruising. Again, if there's something that for other medical reasons you have to be on, always talk to your injector and your specialist in consultation. And then, the other thing about Sculptra is because we are trying to induce inflammatory response, we do encourage people to massage after the injection 5 times a day for 5 minutes for 5 days to just kind of help the inflammatory response get the pressure of the massage, get the circulation there for enhanced outcomes. So if you're not used to that, that might be like a weird aftercare thing, but it's really to keep activating and reactivating that low-grade inflammatory response by which the PLLA really stimulates those fibroblasts to the max. Most of the time, people have initial series of, like, let's say 3 Sculptra treatments, once in a while 4 Sculptra treatments to get that ideal correction. But then, of course, aging and volume loss continues. So most people are, like everything else, on some sort of a maintenance regimen, whether that is 2 years down the road, 1 year down the road, or they lose more weight and they want another vial 6 months down the road. But really, because it's a biostimulator. And for those of you who want to dive more into collagen, I have a whole episode on collagen. It's called The Holy Grail of Aesthetics. So definitely listen to that. But really, collagen decreases from about age 25 down. So there is no such thing as too much collagen, right? Like inside of your skin, like aging is inevitable if you were lucky enough to keep aging. But collagen, like, it just decreases over time, just like time passes. So I don't think there is such a thing as overcorrecting somebody with Sculptra or doing a Sculptra maintenance like too often, let's say if they want another vial in 6 months and whenever that is. So because this is all about telling you the truth about all things aesthetic medicine, I do want to dive into the relevant studies and the science behind Sculpture because Sculpture actually has amazing science. So, what does the research say about Sculpture? I'm just going to go into a few of the key studies worth noting on Sculpture. Number one is really about the long-term efficacy and safety, and that's sort of the landmark study for Sculptra, where it did demonstrate that patients that are treated with Sculptra for facial volume loss showed significant volume improvement that lasted up to 25 months. So the endpoint of the study was 25 months, and at the 25-month mark, which is over 2 years, the patients still looked incredible. That doesn't mean Sculpture doesn't last longer. It's just when they ended the study, the patients still at the 2-year mark had significant improvement in their volume. Now, there are also studies that are looking at the body contouring application, and there is one study out there that focused on off-label uses. So Sculptra was found to be effective for non-surgical body contouring. Patients in the study reported high satisfaction rates, especially with buttock augmentation, which is the Sculptra butt lift, and skin tightening in areas like the thighs and the arms. Now, there is also one meta-analysis on collagen induction. And what a meta-analysis is, it's basically like where they take other smaller studies or bigger studies and multiple studies together and sort of put all the results together based on the results, the patient selection, the strength of the evidence to kind of give you an overall picture. And A meta-analysis reviewing multiple studies confirmed that Sculptra consistently induces collagen production and improves skin thickness and elasticity. So that's the other thing, is that it's not only the collagen, it's also the elastin. Now, what's important here is that this meta-analysis really showed that Sculptra and its results have a consistency across diverse patient populations. So meaning we're not only talking about 35-year-old Caucasian females, let's say. By taking multiple studies together, we can look at different populations, different outcomes, and different patient situations. So that really shows that Sculptra is a very reliable option for many, many patients. Now, these studies underline that Sculptra is effective and it is safe. I got my hands on a preliminary sort of study from Galderma, which is the maker of Sculptra, which is really talking about what I talked about earlier, which is the facial volume loss following treatment with the GLP-1 receptor agonists. So we know that the GLP-1s cause facial volume loss. So in this study that's actually ongoing, they're looking at the combination of Sculptra and a cheek filler, Restylane Lift or Contour, in improving the aesthetic or the volume loss in patients experiencing medication-driven weight loss with the associated facial volumes. So basically, they're looking at if we combine some hyaluronic acid cheek filler with Sculptra for that lower face, that sunken ozempic face, how well does that do? And the preliminary results look amazing in terms of both visible improvement and patient satisfaction, to the point that they're actually right now extending the study. So like I said earlier, in this landscape where medication-driven weight loss is incredibly successful, incredibly popular, we also in the aesthetics world see a lot of associated facial volume loss. And that's really where I see the biostimulators, especially Sculptra, shine. Now, of course, a lot of us, due to normal aging, get a loss of collagen, a loss of elastin, a loss of especially that lower face volume loss. And like I said in my episode on trends in aesthetic medicine, I think the days where we just fill every line with fillers are over. Right? We want a sustainable, natural, wonderful global solutions, and we know that fibroblasts kind of talk to each other. So even though we only inject the lower face, interestingly enough, the glow in the entire face and the fibroblast activity in the entire face actually increase with Sculptra. Like I said, I love Sculptra. It's amazing. I mean, it is really like one of those treatments that in our office, our patients are in love with, we're in love with. The results are great. They're natural, they're sustainable. I just love Sculptra. Now, we've been getting a lot of questions on it, so I wanted to make this podcast episode on it. I hope you enjoy it. As always, if you enjoy this episode, please rate, review, write us, subscribe to the podcast. Let me know what you want to hear more of. In the meanwhile, Sculptra is here to stay. It's exciting. It's one of my favorite treatments that we have, especially in combination with maybe either other fillers or things like a radiofrequency microneedling for skin tightening. So that is all I have on Sculptra. Really, part magic, part science. And I hope to see you next time on the Aesthetic Doctor podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Aesthetic Doctor podcast with Dr. Judith Borger. We'd love to connect with you outside of the show. Follow Dr. Borger on Instagram at Dr. Borger and find more online and ways to work with Dr. Borger at www.theaestheticdoctor.com. Until next time, be well.